because, we talked to a handful of, everyone, we're diverse around here, carriers, freight brokers,
Yeah.
dispatchers, and people are struggling, obviously. And it's like, okay, well, what are you doing now? What can we do differently? And I think this is huge. Sometimes you have to zig while other people are zagging.
Yeah.
Like Jeff Dickinson does so well. Good morning. Well, I'm excited to kind of talk through this because we were chatting with the broker yesterday, and he's like, I just can't seem to get anyone to work with me. I can't even get some quotes. Everyone's customer routed. It's like, what questions are you asking?
Yeah.
Are you asking the right questions?
Yeah.
Things like that. But I'm excited to kind of hear. Did you have any interesting phone calls this week that kind of maybe relates to our topic today?
Great calls this week. And
Yeah.
I think something that is really important, I think to Tulsa. You know what I like about Tulsa is that weirdly large friggin' building right in the middle of town. There is not, this thing is humongous. Like it is like a steeple right in the middle of the friggin' town. It's an office building. I've been in it.
Nice.
Tulsa's a nice little town though.
I haven't been there. I might need to head down there.
It was hot. So there was that. And we went to a couple bars. But I'm not going to get into that conversation. So
we'll save that for later.
Save that for later. But I wonder if there's Tire Killer, is there any parking in that area? And do you pay for parking ever? I'd be kind of curious to hear your thoughts on those two things. We made some interesting calls. I think something that's really interesting about growing as, I'm not even going to say a salesman, but a communicator, somebody that communicates for a living, right? And I think you have to just be willing to float with the river when it comes to keeping up with trends, keeping up with changing your abilities and styles. You know what I mean? I got to say, I'm selling differently today than I was a year ago, than I was 3 years ago, than I was 2008 was a disaster, right? You should have saw me. I didn't know my head from my ass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think something that's really important to keep in mind when you're wanting to stand out in this crowd is that you've got to be willing to, you don't have to keep up. You don't have to feel like, I'm always behind. That's not a good way of thinking about it. You just have to go, hey, I'm adapting to the new times and I want to keep going. Guess what? Everyone has the same feeling. You know what I mean?
And it's so easy to compare yourself to others, right?
Exactly.
You get on LinkedIn, someone got their first customer, whatever, that they met their goals. It's so easy to compare. And I think what you did differently about yourself from how much I've known about you is you put in that effort to be different, whether it's listening to podcasts or talking with people through LinkedIn. Like, there's steps to be taken to try to make yourself think differently. I think that's important to do. Educate.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the first thing I recommend, if you've never done this, here's what we're doing. We're standing out in the crowd. How do we look a little bit different? I usually just grab a get on the ramp, and if I can't, park at shipper receiver. Okay.
Morning.
Interesting. What's going on, guys? Good to see everybody. It's good to see you. Hey, we're talking about standing out today. If you want, throw in what you do to stand out. I'd love to hear it. Jerome Jones, what's going on? I got some ideas for you today too. So keep coming in and just let us know. How do you stand out? That's what we're talking about today. I got to tell you this interesting story. I worked for Tiffany's for almost 5 years, right? Tiffany's is a jewelry store, nationwide chain, kind of does a high-end luxury sort of thing. Been around for 100+ years, right? And they had this huge building, and I don't know if they owned it or not, but I always had to go there. It was in Madison Avenue, New York City. And this kid from Nebraska is working for this kind of fancy company. And as most of you know, I'm not the most white-collar guy.
It's fair to
say. However, I do like to wear a suit, and I like to stand out when I wear a suit. And here's something, there was a few things that I love to do, but in the mornings, when I got to the training office, there's tens of 20 people in these friggin' elevators. I would always stand backwards.
Really?
I walked into the elevator, and instead of walking in and just turning around and, pushing my button, I always stood backwards and turned it into like, I was, at the end of it, and I was a couple years into this, I almost felt like I could have been like, I was a coach. hey boys, let's take a knee, and we
Like everyone's looking at you.
yeah,
and you just-
and so I stood backwards and I just had a conversation with people.
Okay.
Now at that particular time in the day, I was usually walking into that building about 8:30. I'd already worked out. I was already on my probably 5th or 6th cup of coffee. I'm jonesed. I'm not in the mood to just stand there and not talk. Let's have a convo. How's your morning? What are you dealing with? I want to hear. So I used to walk in and I would literally stand the opposite way. I recommend trying it. You are going to get some looks. But people eventually got used to me just standing backwards.
It's just normal.
I would just stand there and I'd be like, hey, how's your day? How's your morning? What's the best part of your day? Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to put yourself, you say this all the time, you got to put yourself and get more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And there's your way of standing out, right? Now, a couple things that I thought was interesting about working at Tiffany's was I met some of the most, I'm not the greatest salesman, right? I'm good because I'm consistent.
Right.
Consistency is what's driven my success.
Right.
Okay. I've met some salespeople. I work with a sales guy, one of the best salesmen I've ever met. But I've worked with some salespeople in my life that were phenomenal, phenomenal silver tongues. They were the silver tongue of silver tongues, right? And I got to tell you about Bill. And I know Schmurdy's not watching today, but there was this guy I met named Bill, and jewelry industry, been in the industry for 20 years, and he wore a bow tie every day, right? Which most people in the jewelry industry, you're wearing ties, you just kind of look casual, but he wore a bow tie and he was truly an industry expert. He knew anything and everything about a diamond. He knew angles, he knew colors and cuts and clarities and everything that you potentially needed to know about a diamond, but he also knew how to relate to people, right? And Bill was one of the best. That guy, the last I checked in, he was working for one of the largest jewelry houses in the nation called Borsheim's, and he did over $15 million in sales a year.
Wow.
Just to put that in perspective, I did that in 4 years, what he did in a year.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's next level.
And the reason why he stood out was multiple things. His customer service was unbelievable. You know what I mean? He wore the bow tie. Everyone's like, what are you wearing a bow tie for? Right? He related to people well, right? You don't have to relate to people well. You just have to be consistent.
Right.
But it is a good trait, right? And last but certainly not least, he was an industry expert because he intentionally took the time to train. He took every Thursday afternoon off and he trained. And he would go listen to, at that particular time, there wasn't podcasts, so don't judge us for that. But, he would go on and listen to like local, not local, but industry experts speak. And they were usually VHSs or CDs. They were kind of coming in. But he took the time to be intentional about his training, right? So if you want to stand out in the crowd, my first thought is what are you doing this week to better yourself, right? And that's probably the most selfish thing that you have to do, but you have to do 5% of your week has to be selfishly driven to grow yourself in some regards.
No, I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important that you do that, but then you get into the curiosity mode, and that's got to drive you being, more successful.
I enjoy that. The one thing I'm going to take away from that is a couple of things actually is the consistency, right? You said you're not the best salesman, but you're very consistent.
Yeah.
On that call I had the other day with this young man, 20 years old, he's in this industry, he's grinding, he's making hundreds of calls a day. I believe him, he's a grinder. But it just seems he's not catching a fish right now, but he's staying consistent. I know it's going to come to him.
Yeah.
He's in a tough situation. He has 6 days to at least try to get someone on board, try having those conversations. But I think what he needs to do is stand out a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And maybe it is selling on his communication skills or trying to relate a little bit more. I don't know if maybe do a little bit more homework on that industry he's calling in on or whatever it may be. I don't know everything so far, but that's kind of what I'm reflecting on. And I don't know if he's watching today, but I hope you kind of took something from what you said today.
I think you hit it on the head. You have to change the way you fish. If nothing is working,
but change it up.
You got to change it up. If you were going to, have you ever watched the show Alone?
I don't think so.
It's one of my favorite shows. My wife and I love this show. One of our programmers loves this show. When you're fishing to go out and fish, because you want the peace and quiet.
Mm-hmm.
That's one mindset.
Right.
When you're fishing because you need the calories and need to eat that week, that's a different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to change not only your mindset, but you got to change the value that you're offering to those people, right? If you're not adding value in today's environment, as tough as it is, and you're not an industry expert,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to raise your own bar, right? That's where the training is coming, that 5% that you've got to do every week of just, I got to get better at understanding technology. You know, I took an AI class the other day with a sales guy.
Mm-hmm.
I loved every second of that class.
Yeah.
I learned so much, right? And so I think it's really important that you try to figure out how to stand out. And I got a couple ideas. Okay. We did some sales calls yesterday, and I thought this was kind of interesting. We made 5 calls. One of those cold calls turned into 20 minutes of incredible question and answer session, ending in the opportunity to quote some lanes, ending in an opportunity to just start to build a relationship because the guy had an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's how it went down. Okay. This is a larger facility. They've got 12 locations throughout the south central of United States, right?
Okay.
So from pretty much from Kansas to Missouri to Oklahoma to Arkansas and Texas, they have locations. So as a sales guy, I like to educate myself on what you just said a moment ago. How do I become more of an expert in an industry?
Mm-hmm.
We'll call somebody and have a question,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is what we did yesterday. Instead of calling and asking for shipping right away at the corporate office, why not see if we can gather up some nuts first, gather up some berries, and go back to the house and kind of work through what I just learned, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we called, and they didn't have an option for shipping. So we just called the local option, and I asked for a sales guy. And I said, hey, I'm a sales guy. I'm in logistics. I really like to know more just about your industry. What are the, as a salesman, what struggles do you have with the supply chain? They had a really interesting product, right? And when you're trying to ship the lightest thing that's possibly out there, shipping peanuts, right? Foam.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different type of deal. There's, your whole truckload's 2,000 pounds, right? So we sat there, we asked him a bunch of questions, and I could hear his terminology. I started writing down notes on, this is how he worded it.
Right. And you're talking to the salesman at this point.
At this point, I'm just gathering nuts and berries.
Right. Talking to the salesman.
We're just doing that, right? And I wrote down all the verbiage because he had a bunch of language that I understood what he was saying, but I was trying to pick up on those key things to understand where's this guy coming from or what's going on. So I would ask him questions like I was a kindergartner,
mm-hmm.
and he loved answering because he's a sales guy.
Yeah, loves to talk.
Yeah.
Why not?
So we went through, and then I said, well, who would I talk to? He gave me the name. He didn't give me the number, but he gave me the name. And so then I called that other location that this other guy was at. And I literally went into Keyword Central from my notes of what this guy just told me. And we related immediately, and 20 minutes later on a cold call.
Mm.
The guy never even knew I was calling. We just related immediately, and I identified 2 issues that they were having in their supply chain that we could fix as a brokerage, right? Boom. I mean, talk about standing out.
Mm-hmm.
The guy says he gets calls all the time, right? Hey, I got a truck in the area. Well, that's not his issue.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't need a truck. He needs somebody to solve this other issue within his supply chain, right? And so that's what, boy, I tell you what, if you want to stand out, try to educate yourself around the sun a little bit before you jump onto the sun.
Right. I like that. Before we hopped on the show, I told you that I don't know, maybe it's just me, but there's a lot of people I know around me that we all want something quick.
Mm.
You don't have your first shipper, or
that poor kid.
You're trying to lose weight.
Kid. Yeah.
We all just want it to happen today, actually. And I think that's how we're wired. You get on TikTok, you're swiping away because you can't sit there longer than a minute. You know what I mean? Like we all want it right now. And I think you just got to take a step back and just be patient. It'll come. You didn't talk to the guy that was going to give you a load. Talk to the salesman.
Yeah.
But you took the time to ask him questions and to try to, at least, like you said, you asked kindergarten questions.
Yeah.
It worked out.
Yeah.
He got you where you needed to be. So I think if you guys ever get that opportunity, whether you're a carrier or freight broker, I think if you're talking to the wrong person, it never hurts to just talk.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just be human and just talk.
Stay professionally curious.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Ask questions that really affect him. Don't make it all about you.
Right.
You know, and I think that unfortunately that kid that, you know, is probably not with a job at the moment, or he's probably going to find another job. He had 6 days to find a client.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, the mindset's different.
Mm-hmm.
His mindset now is desperation.
Right.
His mindset is I've got to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And in some particular cases, when you're just trying to survive, it's hard to be creative. You know what I mean? It's hard to stand out in the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the biggest thing is how do you constantly keep, you know, that creative mindset to be able to ask the right questions.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way of putting it. Just trying to be creative. Think about what everyone else is doing, right? Obviously, we're trying to be different here.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's still saying the same stuff on the phone. Like you said, you got a truck in your area, or you know, just asking or just saying the normal lines, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that creativeness that I think people that maybe they don't know they have. It's in there.
Oh yeah.
You just gotta dig deep.
Yeah.
Think about it.
And you just got to be intentional with your time. You know, I've always thought about, you know, Jerome or Tire Killer, you know, the guys that are on the show that are the single carrier owner operators, you know, how do they stand out?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What do they do different? And besides keeping a clean truck, right? Which I think is important, you know, just taking a little bit of pride in your truck and how you drive and the safety behind what you do and knowing the ebbs and flows of towns. And, you know, those are how you become an industry expert. You know, Tire Killer's probably been to friggin' Tulsa. How many times? Hundreds.
Right.
You know what I mean? He probably knows the town on the back of his hand. Now, maybe not where that shipper is, but he knows how to operate the friggin' town. You know what I mean? Oh, it's over here. I got to go off 35 and head up 785. You know what I mean? The cat knows areas. He's probably been to Chicago thousands of times, right? So, you know, if I'm a carrier and I'm trying to grow my business, or I'm trying to diversify the relationships that I get my freight from, what do I do the next 5 months to be different? Well, number one, I'd start reaching out to local brokers that have at least 5 to 10 employees so that they have an office. If you show up at somebody's house, that's probably not going to work. You know, there's a lot of brokers that are just at their home, right? But if I show up in my truck, I park across the street to a brokerage, say, well, that's my truck right there, and here's my authority, and I'm prepared. Being a driver, I think something that makes you stand out is being prepared, right? I've got my carrier packet right here. Here's my insurance. Here's my W-9. I'm ready, right? And you just start showing up to brokerages. I know it's tough to get in and out, but here's something that I thought was interesting. When I had 3 kids, right? And I remember I was just leaving we had the twins, and I was just leaving the hospital. We were in the hospital for a little while, and a guy came up to us that we know, a good friend. And I said, man, this is it. You know, this is going to be hard. I got babies. And he goes, well, here's what I'm going to tell you. I'll give you the best advice you'll ever get. He goes, take them everywhere you go. He goes, it's going to be a pain in the ass for 5 years, but take them everywhere you go. That truck is a pain in the ass, but take it everywhere you go.
Yeah.
Pull up to a friggin' brokerage and say, that's my truck. This is the lanes I like. Do you have any freight that makes sense?
Right. There's
some way to be different.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And maybe that's not your way. Maybe you don't want to take it everywhere. I've seen a guy on LinkedIn. He's a owner op guy, and he literally will post everything about what he's doing. He say his thoughts. You know, his way of is almost like diarying, making LinkedIn his diary. And I know many people don't like that, but like, hey, how you doing? Great talk this morning. Thank you, man. Yeah. But I know many people don't like LinkedIn because it's getting to the point where like we're complaining, or it's almost a diary like Facebook.
It's like a high end Facebook.
But this guy, I swear to you, every time he posts, there's people commenting and liking it, and he's putting it where he's at, the loads he's just did, or talking about diesel prices. He's communicating. He's being different from what I've seen from any other carrier. I'm sure there's more out there, but I almost bet that people are DMing him saying, "Hey,
you run these lanes.
You running this lane?"
Yeah.
They know he's legit because, just because of his interaction. He's posting pictures of himself and his truck and, his DOT number on the side, right?
Yeah.
He's showing it all. He's not afraid.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this guy. I need to reach out to him to see if I can get him on the show.
That'd be
but
cool to have him on.
I'm sure he's, obviously really busy because he's kind of doing his thing. But, that's a way, in my opinion, for maybe carriers to do it if they're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I like your idea. Let's go shake some hands. And here's my truck.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said about, from a carrier standpoint, of what I started to talk about at the very beginning, is we have to get out of the mindset of today, of today's load, of this week's load. We've got to pull ourselves up out of the business. You drive in the business every day. We've got to pull it out and start to add solutions. Every carrier that I talk to, big and small, think about their box, their services, their trailers. So making sure that you're thinking out of the box. This is why brokers have won or are winning in a lot of the same in the sales game, is because they're looking to provide a solution, right? So why not take the time to go, hey, I won't be in your area until next Friday, but I know I can do it if that would work for you. Give people solutions. Shippers will remember that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Clients will remember, at least he gave me an option. You know what I mean? Instead of just being told no. Right. And a lot of carriers take that mindset of, I don't have a driver today. I can't do it. Well, okay, what's best case scenario? Always keep that in mind as a carrier. I need to give them what I can do and give them the most transparent way of doing that. I think something that's interesting, I think about the sales guy that's one of the better ones that I've ever met. You know why he stands out? Is because he's vulnerable. And he's vulnerable with clients. And he's willing to say, in fact, I loved this. I made calls with him and he goes, hey, I'm not looking for freight that's all over the country. I just want Phoenix to California, to Washington, back to Phoenix, back to California, back to Washington. I can move freight all over the country, but this is where I'm good at. And when you show vulnerability to shippers, you're not the guy that calls, I got a truck, or I can move it anywhere, any place, anytime, right? Right. And so that's his vulnerability, but that's also his superpower. And that's how he's standing out to shippers when he's calling them going, hey, I'm looking for a needle in the haystack. Do you have it? I'm looking for Arizona, California, Washington. That's all I want.
That's different.
Very different.
Yeah. You know what? When I think of standing out, like that's a good way of doing it. There's so many other ways that we probably haven't even mentioned. Technology, marketing.
Right.
There's ways to stand out. Be yourself, I think, but obviously professional. But I think one of my favorite things that you've said this on prior shows about, instead of offering, I got trucks, I'm good at communicating. I'm good at billing. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about billing and maybe how some shippers have a rough time with that.
Yeah. I think something that's a struggle with either A, beginning brokers, beginning carriers, or B, smaller carriers, smaller brokers, right, is that they don't have the processes in place. Okay. If I'm a dispatcher and I'm calling trucks, I can promise you, I would rather call trucks that are 6 months old than 1 month old because they've built processes, right? So when you're talking to shippers and they identify that they have billing issues, they have process issues, they've got these appointments, these things like that, you have to make sure that you're at least providing a solution that's, hey, here's what we do for billing, and I just want to explain it to you. A lot of people do that with technology. Hey, here's how we track, but everyone's got tech now. Yep. So hopefully that tech helps you with billing. You know what I mean? Right. Hopefully that'll help you with tracking or appointments or setting appointments or detention or things like that, because I think it's wildly appropriate to have a conversation around, hey, here's how we do our business, but guess what? Here's how, if things happen, here's how we do detention. Having those conversations up front are way more important than doing it on the back end. And if you don't have those scars from bad billing, if you don't have those scars from a nightmare detention bill, you've got to make sure you're kind of addressing, you got to pre-decide, you got to do it up front because it's easier to have that talk then than it is later. Yeah. You know what I mean? If you ever, I remember God bless my wife here. I didn't really explain to her when we got married the debt that I was in. Right. It's my bad. Honey, I love you. we got through it. But that conversation sure as hell would have been a lot easier up front.
Right.
You know what I mean? We were just a couple kids in love,
Mhm.
you know, just enjoying life, spontaneously going from bar to bar to life and just enjoying life, right? But my dad obviously was an issue. Luckily, I was in sales. I got a couple commission checks and life was okay, right? Thank God. But it would have been a lot easier to have that conversation up front.
Mhm.
So, you know, that communication, it's everything.
That
It's
is
everything. And it can make you different just by clearly communicating what your expectations are and
Mhm.
what the expectations of that shipper. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I feel like my mom and dad, I hope my mom and dad aren't watching, but happy birthday if my dad is. You know, I think my mom has my dad in a different movie than he's actually in. Her
Mhm.
expectations of my dad are different
Right.
than what my dad actually is. He's different movie than what she's watching.
Right.
You know what I
right,
mean?
right,
So
yeah.
setting expectations, understanding what each other are supposed to be doing is more
Mhm.
important. So that
Yeah.
same functionality goes with shippers.
Right. I think if you know, as a broker or a carrier, I think the more you stay curious, then the questions start to flow a little bit differently. You know, the creativeness maybe comes out a little bit different, a little
Yeah.
bit better. So I always try to stay curious, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I've been trying to do that more in life too. You know
Yeah.
what I mean, see something that makes you curious, it's like, oh, let's just go ask.
Let's go see
Let's
what
go
they
have a
say.
conversation.
Yeah.
Why am I so curious? Let's talk about it, right? And I think a lot of people maybe aren't curious enough. Like I said, we all want something now.
Yeah.
We're not really patient, but
It's important that you have that mindset of
Right.
curiosity. Professional curiosity will make you money.
mhm,
And that comes down to sounding different when you pick up the phone and
Mhm.
cold call, sounding different when you email, sounding different when you write a letter,
right.
sounding different than when you walk into a building.
mhm,
You know what I mean? All those things can be different if you focus on them instead of focusing on you.
Right. Yeah, I enjoy that. Anything else that you can think of? You know, in your time of in your span of brokering back in the day, you know, how did you know? Is there something that we didn't talk about today that maybe you did do to stand out?
You know, don't take it personal.
Mhm.
I think that's half the battle.
Mhm.
You know, I don't connect with everybody. Not everybody likes me. There's a lady that's like 30 miles down the road here that hates me. Legitimately, like, I bet she cringes when she sees me at Walmart. Like, she's like, oh shit, I'm turning
She
around.
stays in the car while you're inside.
She's turning it. Not everybody likes me, and I just learned over the years to not
Yeah.
take things personal. You know, you're not the fit for everybody.
Right.
You know,
Sales anxiety is a real thing.
it's
man.
a
Like,
real thing,
It's
man.
this sucker's so heavy to pick up,
It's
and
a
it's
real
so
thing.
hard to hear the word no
Yeah.
or we're customer routed.
Mhm.
We're not onboarding people.
Yeah.
It's hard to hear that.
Don't take it personal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that's half the battle. After that, you know, just you got to stay consistent.
It's almost like dating. You just gotta we move on, right?
Yeah,
There's many fish out there. Just, you gotta do what you do. Just keep
Exactly.
doing you, keep
Exactly.
moving. So,
Exactly.
well, Jared, man, I was really had enjoyed talking with you about this, about standing out, being
Yeah.
different.
Me too.
You know, that's why we just the way we did today. We're a little bit different. We're not wearing our e-carry check stuff. I mean, I got my hat on, but
This is kind of normal.
this
for
is
me.
what this is fair.
You do have a Metallica shirt on,
Yeah.
and I friggin' love it. I friggin' love Metallica.
But we're trying to be comfortable today. I think you need to be comfortable in what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not comfortable, go for a walk. Think about what does, and
Yeah.
you got to take care of yourself first of all. Especially when you're doing sales.
Oh yeah.
Anything in sales, no matter what industry, it's stressful.
Yeah.
100%.
Yep.
So we'll close this out, man. Like I said, I appreciate your time today.
Yeah. You know, obviously, we've had a good show. We're talking all about standing out. Think about your own self in your own business of what am I doing today that I could be doing differently tomorrow, and take the moment to be intentional. Write your thoughts down, because I'm telling you, you start journaling, you start writing, it'll make things a little bit easier for you to just clearly communicate with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate everyone being on. Definitely go out if you like what we do. Go give us a Google review on ecarriercheck.com and go subscribe to our Google link. Obviously, eCarrier Check is an incredible sourcing tool that you can go out and use as a broker, carrier,